All right, let's roll over to the mailbag.
Absolutely.
Yep. So don't forget, if you want to submit to the mailbag, if you've got a question or a talking point or a hot take, you can do that on our Instagram. And I haven't told you this yet, but we'll also be putting up a post within our YouTube. There's a thing where you can put up a post within YouTube for our subscribers. So if you'd like to submit to the mailbag, you can do that by subscribing to the YouTube channel as well. So we'll jump straight into it. So the first one comes from Noah Ion. So who will Richmond be drafting?
Actually, good timely question. We've done our Richmond draft focus this week. So we've kind of working through all 18 clubs. I think we've only got about 3 to go. So if you're, Adelaide through to St Kilda alphabetically, then you can catch yours. And then Sydney, West Coast and Western Bulldogs will be on their way. The Tigers, key forward probably has to be one. They got Jacob Koschitzky. Before we mentioned Samson Ryan, who's more of maybe a ruck forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I think can certainly complement Toby Nankervis and is probably his long-term replacement. But another tall forward, I think, is a must for them. Tom Lynch missed almost the whole year through injury, and they've just lost Jack Rewalt to retirement. So they don't really have those assets. And Noah Bolter can play forward. I think they'd prefer him down back. And that also hinges on if Josh Gibcus is free and healthy as well. So who they could look at, Arch Reed would be a great one for them at their first pick. They don't come in until pick 29. So he's one. Luke Lloyd maybe is one that we named now Richmond and draft analysis piece, just given he's a later selection and maybe one that they can use at the back end of the draft. And then some other guys that maybe provide some outside run or some defensive help, like an Ari Schoenmaker, another one for their first pick of the night. Kobe Shipp, another late kind of draft pick. So they don't have a first round pick because they traded it last year. Mm-hmm. So that's probably why they can't look at the top end guys. But there's some of the names that we kind of had mentioned. Some others as well. Evan Smith, if they want a tall forward as well out of WA. Will Dawson's a pretty tall defender out of Gippsland, if they want some of those key position talent at either end as well. So there's some of the guys we have for Richmond.
Yeah, they're going to want to make that first pick count,
yes.
Considering how far back they are. So next one comes from Matthew Bates. This was Matthew Bates that played for the D's back in the day. The red hair, I think. Wasn't it? Matt Bates?
It was Matt Bates.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, I doubt this was him, but he asks, how come the Suns are allowed to take their academy players in the top 40?
Oh, okay. So, so they're Northern Academy. So there are 2 different types of academy players. So there's Northern Academy players, which are the 4 Northern clubs. So Brisbane, Gold Coast, Sydney and GWS. Given they're not really footballing states, I guess they're kind of afforded these Northern Academies. So you got your Swans Academy, Lions Academy, Suns Academy, and Giants Academy. And they don't have, I guess, any draft restrictions on when bids can come. So like we mentioned earlier in the show, Jed Walter could receive a bid of pick 2, and Gold Coast, as long as they have the draft points available to match a bid, then they get access to them. They can go in deficit if they don't have the draft points. And at the same time, if they are matching a bid, they get a 20% discount as well. So they don't have to have the exact amount of points that I guess, value index totals. But that's why. So NGA is a bit different. They're not exactly... every club can have an NGA academy or does have an NGA academy and can have linked prospects. They're not, it's still kind of similar, part of their junior pathways, but they're a bit different and kind of the criteria to meet an NGA academy position is a bit different, whereas academy kids for the Northern Academies don't really have to, fall under anything in particular. They're just more local kids that they can kind of grow the game in those kind of non-footballing states. So it's working really well for Gold Coast. And this is a year where they will have access to 3 to 4 pretty good players in the draft, and they'll have another one at least coming through next year. And that's why, Sydney as well, a few years ago could get your Cal Mills, Isaac Heaney, Nick Blakey's, that was before the bid restrictions. But even if they had the bid restrictions, then they would have picked those guys up. So there's a difference between Northern Academies and Next Generation Academies. So that's why the Suns can pick up their guys within the top 40, and a club like North Melbourne can't get Riley Sanders at pick, whenever he's bid on, because he's a NGA kid instead of a Northern Academy kid.
Yep. And just to clarify, so the Northern Academy, Brisbane, Gold Coast, and the 2 Sydney teams.
Yeah, so just the Queensland and New South Wales clubs.
Yep. And we did cover a lot of this in our draft points video that is currently on our YouTube channel. I think, as well.
If you want more of an explainer, and it's probably laid out a bit more on how clubs bid match points, then yeah, that's on our page as well.
Yep, easy. All right, next one comes from Bem Gaddy, which is more of a take. So the Suns must make finals next year, given they have 80% of premiership list. 80%. I don't know about that.
That's kind of what Dimmer said in his first press conference. That 80%.
That is right. Yes.
Yeah, 80% of the list's there, and they're probably going to add another 5 to 10% with these academy kids, I think. And yeah, like you said, it's a take, not necessarily a question. So I like to think that they make finals next year. They've only really lost talent, and they'll get in some draft talent. So it's not really like for like, just given the experience you're losing. They get a decent coach in, not that Stuart Dew wasn't, but Damien Hardwick's probably just a level up. And then the interesting thing what I think about next season is the amount of clubs coming up and the lack of clubs that look to be going down. I think Richmond might go down a little bit. Like they went down a lot this year though, so it might not be that much. Geelong probably come down a bit further, but the rest are pretty much on the way up. I think Essendon is still going to be pushing up for a final spot. To Freo bounce back. St Kilda probably the only final side that I can see really sliding, if any will. So the Suns are going to have a lot of competition with a club like Adelaide as well, who somehow missed out on the top 8, albeit through controversy rather than form. And it's going to be a benchmark for them to be finally making the top 8 next year. But whether that's a guarantee just because of the list they've got, I don't think so. But yeah, I think the club would like to see finals football in 2024 for sure.
I could see them having a season like Carlton did in Voss's first year, like where the system is pretty visible, but they just miss out on finals as well.
I'm probably if I'm making a ladder today, I'm probably not having them in the top 8. But just outside makes sense.
In terms of sliders, though, I've got a funny feeling about Port next year. They're very, I don't know, they could be one, I think, as well. Anyway, little pot shot there at Port for no reason. Next one comes from Harrison de Tracy Gould. What do the Dockers have to do to make finals?
There's probably a mix. I think staying healthy is one thing. It's not something they've had over the last few years, and that's pretty much for every premiership team. If you stay fit, you're going to be competing all the way to the end. Collingwood did well enough, I think, this year to stay healthy. That every club has their injury issues at some point, but look at Melbourne in 2021, had next to no major injury issues. Geelong last year, and Geelong in their golden years didn't really have too many setbacks. So that's one thing, but it's easier said than done. Another thing is probably how their forward line works. How much they're going to be relying on Jai Amos. The balance they get out of Luke Jackson and Sean Darcy. What role does Matt Tabernar play, and how accurate are these guys going to be in front of goal? Because that's another thing it's been a big knock for them. Justin Longmuir's game plan is probably not a strength anymore, or it's probably, I guess, more of a weakness when you see how some of these other clubs are playing, and those clubs are the ones that I'm talking about, are the ones that are competing at the top. So there's a lot to play out there. I did see that they're starting preseason next week, which seems a lot earlier than normal, or a lot earlier than most clubs. Obviously, they finished, with 10 other clubs in August, at the end of August. So they've had that space, but their first 4-year players are starting, before the draft, a week out before the draft. So it's going to be interesting to see how many others are doing that. And if not, then that could be an advantage for them to kind of get that preseason up and running. So that's
kind of like that.
That could help. Like I said, I'm not sure if any others are. I haven't seen any of. Most of them are kind of starting at late November, early December for your first and 4 years, and then your senior players. So, mid-November return to preseason training it's not a very big off season for the Dockers, but as mentioned, it's probably the same size as what they had last year, given they made finals and probably returned on time. So hopefully that works for them. Like I said, they're one of the clubs that definitely could be pushing up and won't be falling down. But there's a balance of things that they need to tick off to be back in the top 8 next year.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so next one comes from Simply JXTT. What is going on with Max Holmes?
I think he's referring to... There was a Herald Sun kind of, I guess, half report, half analysis on Collingwood. And I think it was just on Max Holmes having some interest from the Pies. And that makes a lot of sense. I think he was noted as kind of a still side-bottom successor. Collingwood certainly needs some outside run and dash. And you look at the best young wingman in the league, and he's probably second behind Errol Goulden. I don't think Josh Dacos is really considered young. We're talking like the first 2-3 years players here, and Max has been absolutely fantastic for Geelong, and he's a huge part of their plans. I think they've got 13 or 14 guys who are off contract next year that are free agents alone. Plus, you're probably looking at another 10 names, and Max is one of them that isn't a free agent, but he's still unsigned. And what we're seeing more and more now is that it doesn't take too much for a young player coming off contract to decide their own future if they want to leave, despite not being eligible for free agency. So Cats would ask for a lot if Collingwood came calling and if Max wanted out, but I don't see him leaving Geelong. They should have some decent wiggle room, the Cats, as opposed to Collingwood, and should be able to make him comfortable at home at Kardinia Park, despite them likely not being in the premiership window the next few years. But 2024 is going to be a big season for Max Holmes and Geelong, and it'll be interesting to see how the contract run kind of plays out.
Yeah, I think he could be in the box seat for a pretty decent offer, especially with a couple of those Cats retiring as well, probably by the end of next year. So next one comes from James Senior. Likely draft options for Essendon once they slide back 2 to 3 spots.
Yeah, okay. We spoke a little bit about the Bombers and them being in that kind of 6 to 10 draft range spot. I think Connor O'Sullivan's probably a one for them. Good, strong key defender, has leadership qualities, can swing forward if they want. I think one thing we know about the Bombers, they've loved a swingman the last few years. When you look at Michael Hurley, Cal Hooker, James Stewart, Aaron Francis, all these guys, even Kyle Langford's kind of finally finding his home in the forward line. So he's certainly one option. 200 centimeters tall or close to it, I think. Nate Caddy's one, key forward, probably plays a bit taller than what his height suggests. I think he's only about 191, 192. But a bit like Charlie Curnow, great leaping and great aerial marking. So, kind of, while probably viewed as a medium-sized forward, plays a bit taller as well. Bit of outside polish if they want. I don't think they need it, but if they're going for like best available, it could be a Caleb Windsor or a Darcy Wilson. They're probably the 4 that'll be linking to the Bombers. Like I said, pick 10 or pick 9, sorry, and it'll push back to maybe pick 10, pick 11. They're probably the 4 names I think in that mix for Essendon at that point of the draft.
Yep. Interesting. All right, next one from Isaac Grant, bit of a hot take. Port has the best forward line.
It's a hot take. I think he actually mentioned he was a Brisbane fan. I think Brisbane probably have the best forward line. Charlie Dixon as your spearhead, probably just past his best. Like Mitch Georgiadis can start hitting his potential, and when he returns from an ACL injury, certainly can rival. Like him and Todd Marshall together, with the midfield that's feeding them, that certainly could be a lethal forward pairing. Jeremy Finlayson's a nice complementing tall forward, but I think Port fans would like him to be their 4th best tall forward behind the other 3. Junior Rioli or Willie Rioli, and Sam Powell-Pepper at their feet, not bad. They probably want another small forward though, given those 2 aren't always the most consistent. And you can roam through your Rosies and your Horn Francis in that forward line as well. So it's a good forward line, but I don't think it's in the top 3. I think you've got Geelong, Brisbane, probably Adelaide have a better forward line than Port Adelaide, I'd say. Sorry, I won't agree, but it's a take. That's all right.
No, I'd probably put Brisbane in there with just the quality of their smalls too, like Cameron and you throw Bailey in there. I think
they've got a few.
Yeah, I mean, interesting take. Next one comes from Peter Villian. Would the Eagles be crazy to trade their future first for Dan Curtin? Future first.
Yeah, their future first could be pick 1 for next year's draft. And it's one that's been tossed up, as we mentioned earlier in the show, that if they want to get back into the draft and maybe get Dan Curtin after taking Harley Reid, there could be a club like, if he slips to Geelong, I think Geelong would love Dan Curtin, but Geelong might want pick 1 even more, given they've also put pick 8 on the table. But I don't know if he slides that far. Hawthorn will want to stay in the drafts in their draft spot. So North aren't trading pick 2 or 3 for West Coast future first. I wouldn't have thought. Hawthorn wouldn't. Western Bulldogs wouldn't, just given they traded up to get it. GWS might, but given they've got 2 first rounders, So if Dan Curtin's available when they're on the clock, maybe. Melbourne, maybe. But would it be crazy? It's interesting. I think West Coast kind of need a bit of everything. You know, they picked up two really good midfielders last year, and they'll get Harley Reid. And next year's draft is going to be a midfielders draft. So at pick one, you're probably going to be looking at a midfielder, and you're probably going to also be looking at a player that's, you know, could be a compromised draft, some call it, when you've got a Levi Ashcroft or a Leonardo Lombard who are tied to other clubs. So it might not be the worst idea for them, but it just depends at what point in the draft, and maybe if they can get something back as well. You know, you look at GWS and they've got pick 7 and another pick in the teens. Like, would they trade both of them for West Coast's future first? And then that gives West Coast potentially access to Dan Curtin and a Lance Collard or something. Although I know that GWS pick is right after North Melbourne's, and I think North will like Lance Collard. So that it would be a great gamble for them if they could get 2 first rounders for that future first. That's GWS potentially being the best suitor for it.
Yep. All right. And last one from Sam Palmer. Will Shaun Mannagh get drafted?
I'd love it.
Yep.
Yeah, big Shaun Mannagh fan. And being able to watch him at the VFL Grand Final this year. And that's pretty much where a lot of this has kind of rolled on from. He was one of the best players in the VFL well before that game. I think he had a 40-4 performance earlier this year, and just one of the best for Werribee. Obviously, the issue for him is his age. He's 25, 26 next year. But that also shows you that you get that instant injection of you know, a mature body. He's got great pace, great ball winning, just goal sense, match winner. Carlton probably would have been a good one before they got Orazio in. Just trying to think, maybe Fremantle look at him after losing Liam Henry. St Kilda would probably be a good one. Just want some spark and some match winner, half forward that can play through midfield. Does he get drafted though? I'm not sure. He might get a rookie draft spot, or you know, there's a good chance that maybe he goes to a club as a train on prospect and as a SSP chance. But there are a lot of clubs that could do with a Shaun Mannagh on their list, I think.
Yeah, certainly made a name for himself.